He cut her off just like that. No warning. No real reason. Just one sharp sentence that made the whole courtroom freeze. "Ma'am, this isn't a law lecture." And just like that, her voice, her calm, informed, measured voice was silenced. Let me back up a sec. It was a Thursday morning in Dalton County, Georgia. You know the kind, buzzing fluorescent lights, dusty pews older than most of the people in the room, the scent of stale coffee and old paper lingering in the air. Most folks barely looked up when the next case was called. But this time, when Regina Mays stood up, something shifted. To the room, she didn't look like much mid-50s maybe. Dark blue skirt, beige blouse, buttoned high, hair pinned back like she didn't have time for frills. No briefcase, no suquel, no legal pads. Just a worn manila folder tucked under one arm. You could almost hear the assumptions forming as she walked to the front. She was there for Terrence Boyd, a retired bus driver, veteran, and the kind of neighbor who still brought in people's mail when they were out of town. His home was under threat, an eviction order filed so fast and so sloppy it smelled like a land grab. Developers had been circling that part of town like vultures. Terrence just happened to be in their way. Regina wasn't going to let that slide. She cleared her throat, nodded to the judge, one Honorable Gregory Lawton, a man with a chin that always seemed tilted just slightly too high, and began, voice low but clear. Your Honor, under Section 12B of the Revised Housing Statute, an eviction requires a 60-day notice by certified mail. And just like that, Judge Lawton twirled his pen, didn't even look up. This isn't a law lecture, ma'am. She blinked once, just once, and continued, calm as ever. I'm simply stating the relevant statute, sir. Are you a lawyer, Ms. Mays? No, Your Honor. Then don't pretend to be one. And there it was. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't need to. The tension was sharp, unspoken. The bailiff shifted. Terrence clenched the edge of the bench. Regina. She didn't flinch. Your testimony is irrelevant, the judge said. Strike it from the record. She just nodded once, gathered her things slowly, like she had all the time in the world, like she'd already seen this kind of dismissal a dozen times before, and probably had. No raised voice, no rebuttal, no visible anger. But that silence hit harder than any outburst. She walked out of that courtroom the way she came in, quiet, poised, forgotten by most. Judge Lawton, he'd just dismissed the one person in that room who could have taught him more about the law than any bar exam ever could. Because what nobody in that room knew, what not even Terrence fully understood yet, was that Regina Mays wasn't just a neighbor with a big heart and a sharp mind. She was the woman who trained judges. No, really. Federal ones, state ones. The ones who sit high and look low. She'd written parts of the very statutes Judge Lawton claimed she didn't understand. She'd rewritten ethics codes, sat in policy rooms where her voice shaped future courts, and did it all without needing her name on the headlines. But let's hold that thought. Because the ride home, it was quiet. Terrence sat stiffly, arms folded across his chest, his voice low. You knew all that like the back of your hand. That wasn't guesswork. Regina kept her eyes on the road, just nodded. Sometimes the law is the only shield you've got when no one's coming, she said. But you didn't just learn it, he said. You live it. She smiled, but only a little. That's how you survive systems that weren't made for you. Back at home, her house sat tucked beneath 2 willow trees. Modest, still, filled with the smell of peppermint tea and old books. She stepped into her study. No awards on the wall, no degrees on display. Just stacks of legal drafts, policy proposals, and one email blinking at the top of her inbox. And subject confirmed keynote address at the National Judicial Ethics Conference. She opened it, read it slowly. No reaction, just a long breath and a steady hand as she clicked the message closed. Then, she picked up an old photograph, a younger version of herself, standing between 2 federal judges and the Attorney General. No big smile, just that same quiet strength. On the desk sat a folder labeled Judicial Conduct Amendments, Final Draft, Mays. The margins were filled with her handwriting corrections, questions, fierce precision. No classroom notes, no guesswork. These were the words that shaped how judges were supposed to act, whether they liked it or not. Meanwhile, across town, a judge named Clara Hensley sat in a boardroom reviewing misconduct reports. She was one of Regina's former students, now a rising star on the Judicial Integrity Board. In her folder, a 3-page transcript, Regina's full, dismissed testimony from Terrence's case. No highlight, no flair. Just quietly slipped into a section labeled, Case Studies, Misapplied Procedure. A silent dagger waiting for its moment. Weeks later, Judge Lawton arrived at the ethics conference early. Habit, maybe, or control. He grabbed the program, browsed the names, and stopped. Keynote speaker Dr. Regina Mays. His throat went dry. People around him whispered she trained half the new circuit judges. Someone said, helped draft the reform bill. Another added. The lights dimmed, the hall quieted. Then she walked in. No entourage, no assistant, no papers, just her. She stepped to the podium, looked out not with scorn, but with something heavier. Like she'd carried silence for years and had finally decided to hand it back. There's a kind of silence in courtrooms, she began, that no one talks about. And the room held its breath. Her words weren't angry. They were deliberate, devastating. She spoke of judges who silenced voices, not because they were wrong, but because they were right and inconvenient. She told the story of a courtroom where her testimony was erased, not because of law, but because of who said it. She didn't name names, didn't have to. And then she said it. Justice is not a robe. It's not a bench. It's not a nameplate. It's the choice to listen, especially when it's hardest. Some judges cried. Others couldn't look at her. Lawton sat there, frozen. She wasn't lecturing. She was holding up a mirror, and every word reflected what he'd done. After the applause thunderous, delayed, he stayed in his seat. Everyone else filtered out. He waited, and when he finally caught her outside, he said quietly, "You didn't hurt me that day." She turned, met his eyes. "No," she said, "but you dismissed someone I was protecting. That's worse." He swallowed hard. And in that moment there was no robe, no bench, just a man reckoning with the weight of silence. Back in her home, Regina tucked the transcript of that old testimony into a folder labeled personal. No anger, no pride, just completion. And as the sun dipped low behind the willow trees, she sat by the window, sipping her tea, the wind whispering through the leaves. Across the street, Terrence turned on his porch light. Maybe he still didn't know the full extent of who she was. Maybe he never would. But that's the thing about people like Regina Mays. They don't speak to be applauded. They speak because someone has to. They don't need titles to have power. They are power wrapped in patience, sharpened by time and anchored in truth. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bend history quietly, one courtroom at a time. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in that courtroom? Was the judge just doing his job, or protecting a system that silences the wrong voices? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about justice, silence, and what it really means to listen.